Hello everybody and welcome to Teaism, a show aimed at demystifying Chinese tea culture and aiding in the tea journeys of those who, like me, seek the leaf. I'm your host, Jesse. Last episode, I showed how I went from being an American living in Beijing as a Chinese comedian to discovering tea as a hobby and then starting this online tea channel and giving everybody a 101 on how to make Gongfu tea. So if you still haven't seen that one and just want to know how to make tea, go back and check it out. Today's topic is 六大茶类, the 6 types of Chinese tea. In the beginning, the online tea scene was without form and void. Then somebody made a post saying, I get to decide what counts as tea. And everybody else said, let there be a fight. So before I start sharing the 6 types of Chinese tea, I wanted to find what I'm talking about and counting as tea and what I'm not counting. Because people get in a lot of fights about this on the internet. It's like, oh, that's not tea, it's a tisane. Oh, that's not tea, it's an infusion. Oh, that's not tea, that's tea pain. So in English, we generally call anything that's steeped in water tea. So yes, you can have green tea, black tea, etc., but you can also have like mint tea or hibiscus tea. And people ask me about yerba mate and so on. So are these things tea? So making no judgment on whether any of these things are tasty, in the Chinese tea tradition, they would not be considered tea. All 6 types of tea are made from the tea leaf of the Camellia sinensis plant, the tea tree. Those trees can be short, stubby bushes, or they can be massive, wild, old arbor trees. As long as it's Camellia sinensis, it's tea. Things get a little blurry around the edges with stuff like jasmine tea, which is green tea but infused with flowers, or chrysanthemum tea, which is sometimes mixed with goji berry. These in Chinese are called huacao cha, or herbal and flower tea. And while a lot of people in China do drink these teas, the people in the tea scene kind of tend not to because they aren't included in the 6 types of tea. And there's also no standardization around the ingredients or the tea making culture. Maybe in a future video, we can actually talk more about the Chinese herbal teas. If you want to know more about that, leave me a comment and let me know. So what were those words? Tisane, confusion, infusion. So if you hear these words, tisane or infusion, those are there to separate between something steeped in water from tea leaves steeped in water. And you may notice that I don't like using those terms because generally it just doesn't feel natural to me at all. I mean, my take on sharing culture is if most people don't know the word you're using, then you're not using it for them, you're using it for you. So usually I just say tea leaf tea or non-tea leaf tea just because I think it's a little bit easier to understand. But today's video is all about tea leaf teas and the 6 types of teas that make up Chinese Gongfu tea culture. The 6 types of Chinese tea are red, green, white, black, oolong, and yellow. In Chinese, that's hong cha, lü cha, bai cha, hei cha, oolong cha, and huang cha. All 6 of these types are the same tea leaf, Camellia sinensis. But all the teas, they're different. I can explain. It's pretty cool. The difference between the darkest black teas and the lightest, sweetest green teas is entirely based off of a few factors. 1, where the tea is grown. 2, how the tea is processed after picking, and 3, if the tea is or isn't aged. This means when the tea farmers pick their tea leaves, they can choose what type of tea they want to turn it into. So many times they make several types with the same leaves. For instance, Sister Ai, the tea farmer that we collaborate with in Yunnan, she turns her ancient tea leaf teas into red tea, white tea, and both sheng and shou pu'er, both of which are black teas. The reason this matters is because if there's a tea region you like one of their teas, you also might like the other one. And also because if you find you like one red tea or green tea, you might find it's worth trying other types of red tea or green tea. But how do you know which types you like in the first place? Do you just like buy tons of tea and hope? To help people that's why I made the 8 sampler box that comes with basically every type of tea. And I'm actually gonna take you one by one through all the different types right now. So red tea, or hong cha, is probably the tea type that most people are most familiar with outside of China. In the West, what we call black tea, the Chinese call red tea. This is because the British decided to call the tea black because of the color of the leaves, where the Chinese called it red because of the color of the tea liquid. I give everybody in my sampler Quimen red tea, which is the same type that's usually the tea base in English breakfast or Earl Grey. My thinking here is that people will enjoy their familiar flavor, but have a higher quality tea leaf than that would normally be in a tea blend. So red tea is made by first picking the leaves and then allowing the leaves to wither and then kneading the leaves and allowing them to oxidize. So the oxygen in the air turns the leaves dark and adds depth of flavor to it. Then they are dried, which stops the chemical reaction that would have otherwise just turned the leaf into a rotten mush. Some types of tea like Zhengshan Xiaozhong, also known as Lapsang Souchong, also get roasted or smoked for extra flavor. Red tea won't go bad with age, but it's already fully oxidized, so it's not going to change much with age either. It will be better when it's aged, but it's not really as big of an effect as, say, a pu'er or a white tea has when it's aged. So since red tea is fully oxidized, we don't need to worry too much about burning the leaves, and we can actually use boiling water. Now, some of the sweeter notes I find kind of come out more between like 85°C or 90°C, so don't feel afraid if you want to back off the temperature and see how the tea comes out. I usually do a very short wash, about 20 seconds or so, and with that steep time gets a little bit longer with each steep that we go into, especially as the tea starts to lose its flavor towards the end. Depending on the red tea, I would expect to get between 5 and 8 steeps out of a 120 milliliter gaiwan like this. And some types, especially ancient tea trees, types with more leaves than buds, will actually go longer than that. Like Dianhong red tea is made from just the leaves, and that can sometimes be steeped up to 15 times. Red teas have a nice malty, solid body to them with a little bit of tannic flavor, but mostly sweet and bold notes. That tannic flavor, for those who are not familiar, it's kind of that dry mouth feel like you get from a red wine. The Quimen red tea in particular has what's known as the Quimen xiang, that special Quimen fragrance that gives the tea, this tea varietal, its signature kind of calling card. It's very good. But like all teas, there's really a huge variety of flavors between even teas within the tea type. So for instance, we have 2 red teas from Sister Ai on the website, an everyday red tea from 200-year-old trees, and then the 1,000-year-old red tea. And that everyday red tea is sort of more dark, strong, and bold and funky, and the 1,000-year tree tea is super clean and sweet and fruity. Cheers. Ah, very good. The Quimen holds a special place in my heart because this is one of the 4 original teas that was on the website. So red tea is a great fit for people who aren't sure what type of tea they like, since it tastes like tea. So like what most people think of when they think of tea, that's red tea. So it's great for special occasions, but also just for everyday drinking. Super solid. Green tea, or lü cha, is picked every year around the Tomb Sweeping Festival, which lands in late March or early April. And every spring, the tea world just loses its mind. The prices for the first green teas on the market can be absurdly high, well over $1,500 a pound. And I get it, because there's nothing better than that first spring green tea. It's bright, it's crisp, it's fresh, it's sweet, it's great tea. But those prices drop when different regions start bringing in their tea crop. The rain comes at different time, more tea comes on the market. And by waiting a few weeks, you can actually get similar quality for much less money. So that's what I do with the green teas on my shop. I could do a whole episode on the spring green tea in general because of that rush. We always do our spring green teas as a pre-order. So that way we have some idea about how much to get in the beginning of the process and get it over to people as soon as we can. The process of making green tea involves picking the leaves and then doing a step called the shaqing, or a kill green. This basically heat treats the tea, temporarily halting the oxidation so that it won't continue running as the rest of the steps are completed, which include kneading and then drying. The result is you get a really bright, fresh tea with the original flavor of the leaf. So my own sampler includes a Longjing, or a dragon whale green tea. This is probably the most famous green tea in China, with arguably the most famous tea in the world, period. The flat leaves are synonymous with springtime. Let's make this. The first thing that you want to do with the green tea is you want to look at the leaves. Green tea goes bad, which is to say it loses its freshness and fragrance because of the contact with air. This has to do with the kill green step. If the tea had been allowed to fully oxidize, it would be a red tea. But now that it's green tea, too much exposure to air will just make it a not fresh, oxidized green tea. So we want to keep our green tea in a dark, cool place with as little air as possible. That's why we give you the individual wrap bags. Fresh green tea will be a bright green or even a dark green color, while older green tea will be exposed to light and air. It starts to go yellow and brown. So having a trusted green tea person is important, since you don't want to buy green tea that was picked several years ago, or even like fresh green tea that has been stored in glass jars and has started to lose its power. Again, that's why we put them in these little foil bags and keep them as airtight as possible. Whenever you're storing your green tea as well, just make sure you're not exposing it to tons of lighter air. Green tea is also very sensitive to heat. So this is not the type of tea you want to blast at boiling. I like to keep the tea temperature definitely below 80 degrees Celsius. Even 70 is going to make it even smoother and sweeter, and maybe even add an extra steep or two to the 耐耗度. Experiment with different tea times and tea amounts. For Longjing, I usually try about 30 seconds or so. Many green teas have a sort of vegetal, grassy flavor to them, and that comes out even more intensely with longer steep times and higher temperatures. I personally find that balancing the flavor so that that taste is there but not overwhelming is the key to making green tea really well. Green tea also doesn't do many steeps. If you can get 5 steeps out of a 120 milliliter Gaiwan, that's pretty good, but eventually it's going to taste more like water than tea. And so that's one reason why a lot of people, including myself, I don't usually do a wash with my green tea. So I'm just going to give a tiny bit to the tea pets because otherwise you guys would destroy me. And this is very different from like a pu'er, which will give me 15 to 20 steeps, where we can really just feel totally fine pouring off that first wash. And here we go. Oh, I love it. It's great. Just very sweet, crisp, clear. That's clean and pure together is clear. Put that in the script. And finally, good green tea is actually pretty resistant to oversteeping. A lot of people in Zhejiang and other tea areas, they just drink their tea out of like a tall glass. And so they'll just put the leaves in there and steep them as long as they want and refill the glass when they've drunk 2/3 of it. So, just make sure not to use too much leaf if you do things that way yourself, because even with good tea, it could get bitter if you have too much tea in there just steeping all the time. The result of that method I find to be a little less consistent than a Gaiwan, but it's also much more casual and it shows off the color and shape of the leaves even more. Green tea is not meant to be super rich, deep, punch your face in the face sort of thing. It's good for its lightness, its freshness, its sweetness. When you're making a green tea, pay special attention to the scent. That fresh green scent is half of the party here. Smell the lid of your vessel, the steep tea, the pitcher after pouring it. Not a good tea if you have a cold and can't smell anything. Green tea is also very drinkable, partially just because it's made at lower temperatures, so like you're not gonna burn yourself when you just make it and drink it, and partially just because it is so light and smooth, it's the sort of tea you can drink a lot of. And while the sweetness and freshness of the tea is pretty steady across all types of green tea, there are many differences in flavors between varietals. This year, my line of spring green teas, we have this Dragon Well, this year's crop, also the white Anji green tea, Anji Bai Cha, and then a Moganshan green tea and a Hongyao ancient tree green tea as well. So those are going to give you similar but all different flavors. In fact, I'm going back to China to see our green teas and like right after recording this. So I'm probably already there by the time this comes out, or maybe I'm back already. I don't even know how the internet works. I don't know how time works. I don't know who I am. So whether it is available on the site as a pre-order or whether we have the items fully in stock, I really encourage you to check out our spring green tea line. The 2024 crop is very good. White tea, or bai cha, is one of my personal favorite types of tea. It's often found pressed into cakes or balls, and it's also oftentimes aged, which adds even more depth of flavor. White tea is made by the simplest process possible. It is picked, it is then allowed to wither and dry, and that's it. I actually did this last summer when I went to Yunnan. My friend Dui and I, we rode in a giant van all the way through the mountains of Yunnan, and he picked some leaves from the ancient tea trees at Bingdao village, arguably the best tea trees in the entire world. And then we kept them open to the air for 3 days, and we made what might have been the best white tea I have ever had. This 3-day aged Bingdao white tea. White tea is called white tea because of the little white hairs on the leaves and bud, known in Chinese as hao. This character of the hao, the little white hairs, shows up in the names of famous white teas such as the Bai Hao Yin Zhen, silver needle white tea. Silver needle is the highest grade of white tea, consisting of just the buds of the plant. The next is Bai Mu Dan, which is white peony, which has buds and 1 leaf. Gongmei, which has buds and 2 leaves, and that's what we're drinking right here with this Gongmei ball. And then Shoumei, which is all leaves and no buds. So this classification system is how white tea from Fujian is graded and classified, since a lot of the best white tea areas are there, like Fuding and Zhenghe. But I want people to know, these terms don't apply to all white tea. since other provinces make white tea and they don't separate them like this. And then two, it can also make people think the higher grade tea is just straight up better, which isn't really the case. The higher up you go, the more fragrance and sweetness you get, which that all comes from the bud. So these only bud varieties are gonna be very fragrant and sweet. But then further down, the lower down you get, the more body and herbal notes you get from the leaf. Also, leaf quality matters a lot. I would rather have better quality shomei leaves or a gongmei than a really low quality silver needle. So the leaf quality matters too. So when making your white tea, first thing you want to do is check how many years old it is. Because white tea has not undergone that kill green process, it actually continues to oxidize, and that adds flavor and depth. It also makes the tea more resistant to heat, which is why knowing the age of your tea affects the steep time and temperature. So I'm going to be making this gongmei tea ball, which is from 2017. It's already several years aged. So that means I am comfortable steeping it at 100 Celsius, and I'm going to heat my water back up, or maybe even down at 95 or 90 if I want a smoother, sweeter tea. If I was making a 2023 white tea, I would start maybe instead at 85 Celsius and see how the younger, more delicate white leaves handle the heat. The color of the leaf will tell you how old the leaf is. The younger white tea is actually more green, while the mid-level will have a mix of the green and kind of brown, and then the oldest, like the 30-year age white tea that I've had before, will be very dark brown, even black. So I'm making this gongmei tea ball, which is a pressed tea. That's just loose leaf tea pressed into a shape. That means I'm gonna need to give it an extra long wash steep so that the leaves can begin to get inundated with the water. If your white tea is just loose leaf tea, you can do a much shorter wash steep or none at all. Gongmei, in my opinion, is the best price for quality white tea since it has the fragrance from some of the buds, but also depth from some of the leaves. It can be steeped 10 to 15 times once the leaves are fully open, and we can drop the steep time into very short bursts once those leaves are fully open in the middle, maybe even 15 to 20 seconds. White tea is really great because it combines good flavor and depth with great drinkability. It's naturally one of the sweetest types of tea, and so it's good for people who want something crisp and sweet. But especially as you get into the aged stuff, it really has a lot of herbal, funky depth to it. And once it's been aged several years, they have this saying, 一年茶, 3年好, 7年药, which is 1 year is aged as just tea, 3 years is good, and by 7 years it is medicine. And while I can't, and I do not, make health claims, partially because it is illegal in America to do so with FDA approval, and also because the science is still coming in and the specifics of exactly how tea is good for you. I will say though, that I never regret swapping sodas, sugary juices, or anything like that for white tea. I drink tons of this stuff. White tea is also occasionally paired with dried orange peel or chenpi. I actually have a chenpi shomei white tea on the sampler as well. It has less tea fragrance because the shomei has no buds, but it makes up for that because of the fresh citrus fragrance from the dried orange peel. We even have these 3 treasures white tea that are white tea bundles wrapped in huge full pieces of chenpi. The flavor profile really works. Many white teas will also have fruity or floral flavors as well. In this combination of herbal flavor and the light floral sweetness and scent really just makes it a really good fit for new tea drinkers. On an episode of my show Tea Swap, Sohan Fan from West China Teahouse made me an aged white tea, and he shared why, in his opinion, it was his tea of choice when he doesn't know what type of tea his guests want. So when you drink this white tea, like what type of person would you recommend for a white tea?
You know, it's funny that I always say, like being in a tea house environment, I serve tea to people a lot, like a huge range of different people. And if I'm serving tea at like a party and there's 20 people at the tea table and I do not have the ability to canvass the crowd and see what kind of tea they want to drink or what kind of tea they like, and maybe some of them have never done Gongfu cha before at all, I'll make aged white tea.
Yeah, aged white tea is a good choice because this is, I like, I have a 2011 Fuding on the shop. Which is a really good aged white tea, and they like one of the benefits of it is that it's light enough to drink as much as you want, but it has good flavor and like that herbal note to it, which again reminds you you're not drinking water.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's robust and it never really gets bitter. That's a big one because people can, you know, people will boil it, people will steep it super, super long.
Beautiful color. So with that, we're going to draw this episode of Teaism to a close. Now, I know what you're thinking. He said there are 6 types of tea. How come he only did 3? Did he have a stroke? No, I just intended on doing all 6, but then actually it got a lot longer than I expected. So I'm going to do the next 3 in the next episode. And that will also give me more time to talk about oolongs and pu'er, both of which are a bit more complicated than, say, green tea, in the sense that there's really different flavors between different types of oolong, different types of pu'er. The differences can be pretty big. So in the meantime, I just want to say thanks to everybody for watching. I really hope this is a help for people who are getting into tea, starting their tea journey. And I hope it's also deep enough for people who have been doing tea drinking for a while and get something out of it. If you have a topic that you think would make a good Teaism episode, please do leave that for me in the comments. As I pour myself some of this white tea. Cheers. Ah, love it. And also, in fact, if you leave a comment just about anything, let me know. It feels good to see those comments, because these videos take a lot longer to make and write and produce than just a normal tea video. And so it always makes me feel better when I know it's actually reaching people. And as always, don't forget that all the teas, the tea equipments, the kettles, the teapots, these are all available on my site, jessesteahouse.com. You can use the phrase Teaism2, use that as your secret code to be able to get a discount off of your items. And we can ship anywhere, worldwide. We have a warehouse in the USA, so everything as you're ordering is from America. You don't need to wait for it to get shipped one at a time from Asia. And that is your best way of supporting the channel, because it really is, everybody wins. You guys get great tea and great tea things. It also allows me to do crazy things like fly all the way to Asia to make videos for people, and to hire our editing team to be able to make sure the videos are so good. So thanks again, everybody. I'm Jesse signing off. 大家多喝茶。